when I don't know, I'll just assume they're one of your friends or family.
I see, because they'd be commenting on like the Facebook page, right? Not, I was thinking like
Yeah.
show up in the chat here, but not as that.
Yes, they would have to comment on Facebook. All right, welcome everybody. I do believe we're live. It's good to see you all. Thank you for joining us. This is our show about screenwriting, and I have three guests who I know them all from Los Angeles, but we're not all in Los Angeles anymore. And without any further ado, I will hand off to our first guest, Candace. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you like screenwriting and what you're doing these days?
As she said, my name's Candace. I mostly do film TV writing. I used to do a little dabbling in theater writing. But I guess the reason I like screenwriting and for film and TV is I get to make things up and not get told that I'm lying if I want to. But just building worlds is a lot of fun. Also, I just in general like constructing. I love linguistics, so constructing dialogue is a lot of fun for me. So it's way more fun than writing a book, in my opinion, but I'm biased that way. Currently working on a project that's heading into production. I'm actually directing on a short film I wrote that we are now in the process of writing a feature on. So it's a little poster behind us for it, but that's about all I got going on right now. Oh, and a series that I think I can officially say I'm working on. So a sci-fi fantasy series. So it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Thank you, Candace. Daniel.
Hey, I'm Daniel Corey. So I started off writing in live theater and then moved into writing screenplays. I've written some graphic novels that I published a few myself with my company Danger Cat. I put out a few through Image Comics, Moriarty and Red City. Then I wrote my first novel last year. We're working on getting that published, so it's not available yet. But I'm just kind of back to screenwriting right now, writing spec scripts, and that's kind of what's been keeping me busy lately. So
you've been winning all kinds of awards.
I won a few awards from some festivals.
So, Matt.
All right, I'm Matt Wilson. I've written for some cartoon shows. I've gotten to write for some of those on assignment, shows like Crypto the Superdog, Brandy and Mr. Whiskers, which is a Disney Channel show not many kids saw, I think, but I thought it was a fun show to work on. Let's see what else. A new Transformers, one called Monster Beach that's airing now in Australia. And then I've done those like on assignment, but now I've also done a lot of just like my own stuff. Like I've just made independent movies. I kind of figured out this thing years ago. It was actually initially inspired by Betsy and some friends when they would go make their own version of Shakespeare plays. Like they were making A Midsummer Night's Dream and they'd shoot the whole thing. And I was like, wow, that's cool, because everyone was doing shorts, but here they would go do a full feature-length thing. I was like, I should try something like that. So anyway, I've now, fast forward many years later, I'm just now wrapping up work on my fifth feature-length movie that should be coming out sometime this summer. But the last couple ones that I've done are called The Pastor and the Pro, that's on Amazon and Tubi right now, and also another one I did a few years back called The Virgins, and it's the same. It's on Amazon and Tubi.
Cool. Awesome. I'm a big fan of all of your projects that I've seen so far. I'm really looking forward to Candace's project coming out. You're going to production next month, right?
It's going to be released in August on Red TV. Well, maybe September, early September probably on Red TV, but yeah.
Awesome.
So we're shooting in July. It's a musical drama, so I'm excited about it too.
Ooh, I love musicals. So yes, for anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Betsy Freeman. I'm coming to you live from Vancouver, Washington. And as Matt mentioned, yes, Sarah Adolphson, my roommate, who was my roommate for altogether a good long time. She used to do some Shakespeare indie stuff, which was great fun. And I love being pulled into people's projects. I love the teamwork aspect. I also worked for a production company when I first moved to LA, and I read tons. I worked in development, and I also then later worked for a screenwriting management company. So I just read tons and tons of screenplays. Some of them were good, a lot of them were not. And I'm working on some stuff. I did have an episode for a show that my friend Kristen produced called Ladies Keeping It Real a while ago. So that was fun to have one episode, a short episode that I produced. And I've got some things that I'd like to get done, but I'm not planning on getting them done anytime soon. I have a lot of things ahead, but rewriting, of course, really needs to happen for me before I can get my feature done. And so I'm really interested to hear all of your process, and I'm sure I'm going to get some good ideas out of it. And for any of you that are watching and you want to write a screenplay, or you just need some good advice about how to brush up your skills, I'm really looking forward to this hour. So we've written some questions together, but if you're watching and you have a specific question, feel free to leave it in the comments, and we're watching and I'll try to bring those in. So our first question is about today's screenwriting scene. So the world of entertainment and stories on the screen is constantly changing. So what are the challenges and opportunities that you are facing right now? Let's go to Daniel first.
I think he's saying in the chat that he's frozen.
Yeah, he's having a connection issue.
When I was looking at the questions, I was looking at the
Just
chat.
being thoughtful. Okay,
He's working on rejoining.
coming back. Okay, Matt, let's go to you first.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So today's world, I mean, it's so interesting. It's changed so much, even from like when I was first starting to like, get into this and write scripts and stuff. I feel like there's so much opportunity now. Like with, okay, number one, say just if you want to write for like a big produced show like on Netflix or whatever, there's more of those shows than ever. There's just thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And new ones are coming on, all the time. There's also the independent route. Like you do like what I do with the independent movies. You can go make your own movie and distribute it through like places like Amazon, or maybe it's picked up by Tubi or something like that. So it's like there's so much opportunity. But at the same time, though, it is harder than ever to get people to actually watch stuff because I think a lot of people feel the way I do when I scroll through the endless Netflix list, like, man, so many options. Why can't I find anything I want to watch? And just spend so much time just trying to find something, and then oftentimes still end up being disappointed when I actually do sit down and watch something. So it's like there's great opportunity to get stuff made, get stuff out there, but a much bigger challenge now to get people to actually engage with it.
Yeah, it's very split. It's very split up. The audience is sort of everywhere and nowhere necessarily. So I can imagine that's a big challenge. Candace, what about?
Yeah, I think I'll just piggyback off of the tail end of what he said and go from there. Yeah, there's so much content out there that's this overexposure, especially coming out of the backside of anything almost going in a way for these distribution companies during when we were all in lockdown, production was shut down. So the content was just, being, redone in some capacity, re-releases, or they'd pull a lot of foreign films and so they just kind of flooded the market. So personally, as a writer, like my biggest fear is, I'll write something and then it just won't be as engaging anymore because people are just bored with the content. So like even with this project, as a musical drama film, like balancing that is really hard because there's two very distinct styles in writing something like that. And so a challenge that I'm personally working on is like, how do I make it modern and relatable in a way that coming out of the backside of this flooding of content that, people are still going to want to engage with it and still want to, participate in however they feel participation should go for a musical drama. Like there's the writing aspect with lyrical writing, and then there's the writing aspect with, the actual film itself. And so getting people to engage is probably the hardest part, because as a writer, like if your projects aren't getting engaged with by viewership, then you're less likely to get the next job writing or get your next project out there more, because if you haven't shown marketability as a writer, then your next project you're gonna have to work twice as hard to prove that it's marketable, even if it's the right right genre for the era or whatever that we're in. So it's kind of where I'm at. At least my opinion.
And I would imagine that since in a few, like I'm sure there's a lot of things you can pull instantly in terms of market research, and numbers is all pretty instantaneous, but at the same time people are still getting sort of settled and figuring out where they're gonna like, are they gonna be like loyal to Hulu, are they gonna be loyal to Netflix, are they gonna be like how, and that's, I'm sure that stuff over time is really gonna take a while to sort of figure out where is your demographic, and what is it about these different slots that you can cater to and really find your niche. It might be constantly rearranging. Okay, we're letting Daniel back in, and I'm hoping that he can stay this time.
There he is.
That happens. The magic.
Is this laptop number 4?
I feel like this is iPhone.
Welcome back. We can't hear you. Oh no. Oh, bye.
Out again.
Sorry, we're all laughing at his page.
So sad. I actually had this happen it's funny because early on in the year, I was in an opera and I was supposed to do an Instagram takeover. And I was really excited about it for the Mission Opera I was supposed to take over their Instagram account all day. And I was so excited about it. And they had sent me this whole list of questions about the pandemic and performing and what it's like. And I was just really like, I had my filming spots picked out and everything. And then everything just went wrong with my technology. I could not do a darn thing. I was trying to do too much changing around. And anyways, so
speaking of challenges, technology, I think we can all put that on the list these days. Like,
absolutely,
writers' rooms happening digitally, and email chains instead of in-person conversations, and all of that is just definitely a change as well. I'm going back and forth with a writer on the series project we're working on. That's been a big issue. Is it's like, oh, I lost my art there. And then we wait, and then she comes back on, and we're like, okay, let's talk about the project again. Let's get back to writing.
I think that technological advancement, though, is opened things up for independent filmmaking. Like a lot of what I am able to do now is because technology has advanced so much with all the filmmaking tools, not only just with the cameras, but like with the editing software, and even just like access to information. Like I had so many issues that I came across that I still come across when editing the movies when I'm having technical issues. My way of figuring everything out is I just Google it. I find YouTube how-to videos and things like that. I've been able to solve every single technical problem I've ever had just by like Googling it or looking through YouTube videos. So I feel like that's like a huge opportunity that wasn't here just I mean like 20 years ago. It's like you couldn't do stuff like this at all.
100%. And we do have we have new formats. I mean, virtual reality script writing is a thing now that, some of my friends got really interested in, and we're finding big opportunities. And I don't know how that's panning out for those folks. I need to sort of check in on that thing, but I want to go to Daniel. Can we hear you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm on my phone now.
Excellent. Yes, that is it's work. As well, Candace knows, last time she was on, they had to sort of help talk me through some tech challenges, and we did the whole show from my phone. Today's screenwriting scene. Let's talk about Daniel. Since things are always changing in that world, what are the unique challenges and opportunities that you face as a writer?
I guess I wish I could have heard what you guys all said, because I'd love to hear. I'll have to go back and replay the show because I'd love to hear what you guys had, what your thoughts were. But a strange thing now is like when I was first writing screenplays in my 20s and I was being mentored and studying, there was a certain way, like in the 80s, 90s, things were done. Like a lot of money was being spent on spec scripts, like. Because like not everybody was like writing screenplays, not everybody could, not everybody knew the format, blah blah blah. Back then it was like more of a mystery, and I guess not as many people writing movies, and you could like you could make money writing spec screenplays. And so the expectation at that time, when I was learning in the early 90s, early 2000s, was you get option, you're gonna get option, and they're gonna my audio's muffled. I don't know what I can do.
It's the volume's gone down.
Your hand's over your mic. Your hand is over your mic.
All right. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me? All right. Okay. So, anyways, in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was this thing. It was like, okay, you'll get option. You're going to get like, 10% up front, and then you're going to get, your full payment of $1 million once the movie goes into production and and all that. Now fast forward 20 years, that just never happens, and I've been optioned a few times. I actually have a project under option right now, which is great. And it's with a big studio, which is great. But like that, it still plays out. There's no money until the last minute. So, it's like, you got to go. It's amazing how many people have to really, get onto your project and believe in you and believe in the project for it to get up any chain for any possibility of actually getting paid for anything, So like I got one of my books optioned, and major production company and a major studio behind it, big producer with big credits and big agency backing, but they're like, oh, we got to go out and pitch it to buyers. The production company's attached. Great. Well, we got to go pitch it for buyers. Okay. Well, now the production company says we need a showrunner. Got a showrunner, which is great. major name showrunner with done some huge shows that you've seen. Nothing's been announced, so I can't say yet. But still, you know, we still got to work our way up there, you know? So, but it's great though to see, but the good thing, the nice thing about it is, although it takes longer to get to this end game, it's great that all these wonderful people believe in my material. And it's like so many things are having to happen to line up to get it just to this point. All the love I've experienced has been wonderful. So that's great, you know. But yeah, this kind of 80s, 90s mentality of write a script, spec script, and you're gonna get, you know, $10,000 against $500,000 and yeah, that does not happen.
I love that you brought up the optioning thing, because that is kind of a challenge now as optioning has changed so much. As a writer, you're like, oh, I wrote this concept, and they're like, well, I'll option. You're like, oh, you know, as a younger writer, I was taught optioning meant they're going to pay me something to start the feature work on that section. They don't do that anymore. They say we're optioning it for a percentage of the profit. So basically, we're going to give you a percentage of what we make off of it. It's guaranteed if you start writing us the feature. And I went, what? That's not what an option should look like. And they're like, no, this is what all our option contracts look like. And they would show me like samples. They're like, yeah, we've optioned this film and that film, and this is how we did it. And I was like, what? I'm so used to the concept of option being you're going to pay me. And now they're optioning kind of on a bet of selling it, essentially.
Yeah.
Bizarre to me. So I'm glad to hear someone else has run into that, where you're like, unless you're working with a really big studio, you're not really getting paid much of anything anymore for an option.
Well, I got a big studio in the loop with mine, but still, you know.
Okay, and I would say this conversation, all this stuff about like all the great difficulty of like, you know, getting, whether it's getting the option or even like having all these great attachments and still having difficulty of like just getting into the finish line and get it made. It's like, this is all what has inspired me to just continue to do my own independent movies. I mean, I would love like, hey, I would love to sell a script to a studio. I would love to have something, you know, get set up for like years and years and years. That's all I was trying to do. Like, was just, you know, write something that would sell. But then in the end, the only things that got made feature-wise, the only things that got made were the ones that I've just gone and made myself. Because again, it is hard, because like what you guys are describing, it's like in LA, like everybody that I knew, that was like their same story. You know, everyone's just trying, you know, and it seems like, man, like even the people who are really, really good, you read their stuff, you're like, man, this is amazing. Like this is gonna get made, and they have big attachments, and then it still like doesn't come together. It's just a very For those of you considering getting into this, it's a frustrating world. Be prepared.
Yeah, it's because like you're right, because you can have all the attachments and all the things that you can have the best story in the world, but the thing is that you got to have a chain of people that love it. There's got to be a chain of people, you know, and you know it's terrific when you get that chain. I've never gotten to that point that, you know, except for on this project here. You know, I have another project, another book we've heard of that have made huge movies, and it's just like, you know, it's difficult for people to commit because they don't know, well, what format is this? There's so many formats now. There's streaming, there's, you know, theatrical's not as much anymore as it was, you know. There's so much streaming, there's so many platforms, and every platform has its own flavor and its own style. And so the conversation becomes, well, we got to figure out what our take on this is going to be. You know, do we want to go the darker Netflix, HBO route? Netflix has this many routes you can get into. HBO is very hard to get into because this, that, and the other. Do we want to make it a network thing where it's not as dark and it's a little more optimistic, blah, blah, blah. Who do we have to get attached to get this version made? This, you know, all this sort of thing. And it becomes overwhelming, and people do tend to just kind of disappear because they just can't figure it out, you know? Yeah, because it's like
they were telling us when we were in school is they actually switched. The major I was in was they taught writing and they taught producing. Now writing and producing is the same track. They're actually teaching writers how producers think and work so that they can basically produce their project until a producer says, oh, you've got enough done that I'll take it now, and I believe in it, because that's kind of what you have to have. And it's just wild to me. That's kind of what, you know, like when we start a project now. So like we just launched my production company last summer, in the middle of the pandemic, because we had a lot of downtime to start planning productions. Worked out great, you know, but in that process, like even when I was writing, I was thinking about my projects in terms of where am I going to ship it to? Who's going to want this type of title? Who's going to buy it? And like, that's so odd, because as a writer, you shouldn't have to think about that. You should just think about the content. But like you said, there's so many platforms now. You have to think about that in a way, like who's going to buy it? How's it going to end up out there? And then kind of form it to that, you know, like your base concept. And
I mean, this all Yeah, I mean, you always have to just like have your business hat on, no matter what, you know. It doesn't. I don't think it doesn't matter what kind of cushy situation you may end up in. You know, you're never only just 100% only an artist. You know, I mean, the people who are, there's a very rarefied, you know, few people that are probably in that. You know, so like you might be under contract to do X number of things, and you're going to get paid for, and that's great and all, but you have to think about the target content, what the tone needs to be. You know, there's a lot of business points to the art that you're doing. You know, how violent is it going to be? You know, will it be, where will it be set? You know, what are the politics involved? You know, there's going to be a lot of, you know, because just what's the destination for this going to ultimately be? There's so much, but you know, it's you know, it's terrific too. You know, it's fun to have to think about all that stuff. You know, it challenges you.
The challenges do make writing more fun, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's you might jump into something thinking it's going to be one thing and it ends up being something else. And sometimes that's cool.
Everything I've ever written, like I try to really plan out beforehand, you know, like how, I mean, I know we're going to talk about process, I think, later here, but like I'm just amazed at like how I can never like kind of stick with my own plan that I start with. It always just ends up completely different.
Yeah, you end up having like a simple, like, you end up like, I mean, you know, you end up in the beginning, it's just like, oh, I want to do this kind of thing with this kind of character that has this kind of scene, because that'd be cool. And that's totally antithesis of the art of like writing. We always cheat, say, oh, I like this kind of thing and I want to do it. You can't start off that way. You can't start off with a mood or a, you know, oh, I like this kind of scene, I want there to be a big car crash or something like that. That's a terrible way to start anything, but we do it anyways.
I always have like daydreams of like little like character moments or like little scenes and stuff. When I'm first getting the ideas, I'm like, oh, this would be cool and that'd be cool. You know, I'm having like these ideas. And then by the time the finished script, you know, is done, it's like none of that is left in there. It's all like,
like your character moments
like always falls by the wayside.
Character moments, like you said, though, that's a good way to think, you know, because you're thinking in terms of character, and like you're planting a seed for yourself to actually do the real work, you know, planning this character life, which is what a story is. And sometimes your initial idea doesn't end up being, you don't need it. It's just part of the architecture. That's a good way to start, you know, thinking of character moments, because you're thinking of what the character want is, which is the seed of what the story ends up being, you know. But, you know, the really bad thing that I do, that I tell everybody not to do, is think in terms of concepts and premise, you know. What if a guy's stranded on a planet and he needs to do this and do that and get away or something like that? It's a terrible way to start. Nobody should start that way. I mean, if you can start that way and write a really great story, you are lucky.
It's ironically the first thing they teach you in film writing, if you try and take a class, is what's your premise? What's your concept? Lodestar, premise, topic, what, like that. That's what they always say. And it's funny because you're right. You learn that way, but then you find out as you're writing, you're like, that didn't work at all. Like, it's a nice guiding light, if you will, a general idea, maybe, but
it's not destructive to do that, really. But like, you know, the main thing is like, what's your character's problem? And then you place a character with that problem into, you know, a period of history or whatever, and then you can start working. But if you just want to say, I want to write a World War I spy movie and it's going to be cool, what do you do next? You're not giving yourself a guideline to go anywhere. You know, you have to have a character with a problem. Yeah,
that's right. All right, so that leads us to question number 2. That's good. So we talked about the pain of like getting a story from one space to another, kind of, and trying to get it out in the world. So that's like pain phase 2 or phase 3. So then but there's the first phase, which is actually writing the story. So what are the sort of topics or ideas that inspire you to go through the writing process? We'll go to Daniel first.
Well, ideally, when I'm not cheating, like I would say that I often do, and thinking in terms of like, you know, situations and things like that. Ideally, it's just starting with a question of what the character's problem is, like I was just saying. So, you know, usually it's like, I think of a story of just like, how does a character identify itself to the audience? And it's through a problem and how they solve it, you know? So what's the problem going to be? And it's always an everyday thing. And it's usually a reflection of whatever I'm going through, you know? So it's like, you know, is a character seeking a sense of identity, you know, would be a problem to start with. That's the question, you know, can somebody that has no sense of self-worth find it? you know, and then you can put them into World War One trenches or something like that. You know, so that's kind of generally how I get started, is just with the character type and the general problem that they got to deal with, and then insert them into a situation, period of history, or, you know, you can put them into a world of journalism, or put them into a world of politics, or a world of law enforcement or war or whatever. But they have to solve some kind of personal problem throughout it, you know. So if you think about like Gravity, that movie of Sandra Bullock that comes to mind at first, you know, at the core, it's about a woman that is dealing with the grief of the loss of a child, you know. And then they said, let's have her do that while she's on the space shuttle, you know. So yeah, so I guess that's how I get started. Was that the question you asked? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How you get started?
Are those the specific topics, and what are the topics and ideas that inspire you? Is it you just start with the character, with the problem, and that's what gets you through? Because I love that movie, by the way.
Yeah, and it's usually just a reflection of what I'm dealing with in my life. So my personality comes out, and that's what, you know, I'm sure Candace and Matt do as well. You know, you see the person in the writing, you know, and you watch a certain movie by a certain filmmaker, you see their personality. You know, watch a Tarantino movie, you know, you're watching one of his movies, you know. So, but yeah, dealing with something that I deal with, but through another person's perspective in a fantastical situation.
Your fantastical situation. All right, Matt, what are the topics and ideas that inspire you?
Okay, all right, well, a lot, you know, because I've kind of done my stuff kind of falls in two categories, like the cartoons and the independent features. Okay, so for the cartoons, I figure like the inspiration for that should be obvious. It's just fun, you know, like we all grew up loving watching cartoons when we were kids. And then at a certain point, actually, when I was in college, when I was at Biola, one of the screenwriting classes I had, they had a chapter in the book that we read about specifically writing for cartoons, because it had been written by a guy who had written for some animation. So I was like, that would be so cool, like write for, you know, cartoons, come up with like fun stories like the ones I liked, you know, growing up. So like that's the, you know, so that's the cartoon side, and it's still fun every time, you know. The jobs kind of come here and there, you know, kind of few and far between, but like when I get to do them, it's just like, oh man, so much fun to just like daydream about like what is, you know, fun, silly stuff that cartoon characters can do. For the independent features, totally different. What I've really started to focus on right now, and I really get inspired about the types of stories that I like to tell are about, I just call them like movies about Christian characters, like not necessarily Christian movies, but about Christian characters. I think that like I had no interest in doing anything like Christian movies for a long time, because like I didn't watch those movies. I mean, I've been a Christian since I was little, and yet like I had no connection with these movies at all. You know, I didn't really even watch them. The rare chance when I got to see one, I was like, oh, this is just terrible. And I think and others, you know, like other like believers, you know, that I know from like the industry, all kind of felt the same. Like, yeah, we don't really want anything to do with any of that. But the whole thing about like, you know, like writing, like, well, you know, write what you know, write what inspires you. And like, and the older I got, the more I kind of like, the more connected I felt to my faith, and the more I wanted to explore stories in that world. But to try to do it in a more kind of like honest way, because, you know, what I felt about watching a lot of like Christian movies or portrayals of Christians in just regular movies was that neither side was really, you know, all that accurate. Like they're just like they're great saints in the Christian movies, and then in the other movies they're just, you know, they're completely silly. They're like Ned Flanders or something. I was like, all right, neither of those are really accurate. But I feel that actually there's a lot of good material for a comedy in the Christian world. So I just said like, all right, how can I, you know, dive into try to tell stories like that? So the first one that I did was this movie, The Virgins, which I made a couple years ago, and it's a story of like a Christian couple. They've waited, they've saved themselves for the wedding night. They're only gonna have one night together before the guy has to leave for the army. He's being shipped off to Afghanistan, so they only got one night. Well, then they accidentally lock themselves out of their honeymoon cabin and end up having this crazy adventure trying to do the one thing they'd like to do before he's got to go in the morning. And that for me, like the inspiration there was like having these moments where feeling like, man, like I did everything right. Like I'm trying to follow God. I'm trying to do the right things. And yet things still fall apart and life still does not at all go the direction that I had hoped it was going to go if I sort of do the right things here. So the hope was that there was something that was, I think, sort of true to the I guess Christian world, I guess, but that would be relatable for anyone, that people could look into this and see like, oh yeah, like I've had hard times like that too. So yeah, and that's still, the type of stories that I'm doing now with the independent movies. The last one I did, the Pastor and the Pro, was about a young single pastor who needs a date for a big church dinner. It's like a couples thing, so he actually hires a prostitute to pretend to be his girlfriend for this dinner, and things get complicated from there. And then I have a new one, which should be coming out hopefully this summer here soon. It's called Danny Doom. It's about a young high school church intern. He's in love with this girl he knows from Bible club at school, but she pays no attention to the Christian guys. She likes the bad boys. She's always dating the rebels. So he now tries to transform himself secretly into an alter ego, into a rebel, to try to win her over.
Awesome.
That's the kind of stuff I like to do.
So you've been shooting that during the pandemic or before?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that was a whole thing too. We shot last year in July, because I'd written the script like the year prior, and the plan was always to shoot in maybe like spring or summer. And then pandemic hit there in March, and so I kind of kept like making progress. Like, all right, we'll shoot like in July, because I was like, all right, because by July 2020, coronavirus will be a thing of the past. And obviously it was not.
No.
But what's interesting is that, like, because it worked out well, because I already write the scripts, so that most of the scenes are just maybe 2 or 3 characters. I do that for budget reasons, because that's kind of all I can afford to go out and shoot on my own. But also with the crew. I mean, I've always worked with a very small crew. It's just like me and maybe 1 or 2 other people. So because of that, all of a sudden it's like, well, I have the perfect conditions to do like a movie in COVID, when at any given time there's only like 6 or 7 of us hanging around. So it's like it worked out. We were able to shoot it, and we just we wore masks and everything, and except for when the actors were on camera, and it worked out.
That's awesome. All right, Danny Doom. And where are you going to release that one?
That's still to be determined. Most likely Amazon. I'm just talking with some various people right now, but most likely just Amazon.
Awesome. All right. Candace, what inspires you? Sorry, go ahead.
I guess it just leads me. They both kind of hit on this. My biggest thing is character. So when I'm writing my writing process, and I guess we're gonna get into that in another question, it looks like, but my writing process is very character driven, because when you're thinking about, again, I'm a producer, writer, director, so I'm still putting on that producer cap sometimes at first and saying what's going to be relatable, what's going to connect. And I think both of them kind of hit on this, and their answer is it's all about the character. It's really less about the story itself, as far as like the action sequence of how they get from beginning to end of the film, and more about the character development. I think when it comes to engagement and getting people to want to come back and watch the story again and again, or watch the next thing you release. And so for me, that's what gets me through it, is I like really connect with my characters. I sit down with them, I have coffee with them, I get to know them, I figure out what makes them tick. And so then when I'm really ready to just give up on writing the story, I kind of reconnect with the characters and say, okay, I've obviously lost my connection. Like, what's, why am I wanting to walk away from their story? Because if I'm wanting to walk away, then when it hits the screen, the viewer's going to want to walk away. Most likely, like 9 times out of 10, that's what's happening. We're just dipping and nose diving. And so I'll kind of back up, maybe a few scenes, whatever, but I reconnect with the character. So it's funny, like people laugh, because we were talking about this earlier. I could, I could go on and on and on and on about my characters, and there's only 20 pages about their story. But I could tell you for days about everything about them. They're, 7-year backstory of my main character from my short film that's 20 minutes long. So it's 7 years in 20 minutes is not going to happen, but you learn about his 7-year journey through those 20 minutes because of the character development that's there. So for me, knowing that that's how people connect and engage, and Matt brought up Christian films, they've gotten better recently, because I think they've started doing this, writers who write quote unquote Christian or faith, we call them faith-based films as writers, because Christian film isn't really a genre. But your Christian filmmaker, faith-based film writing has kind of developed more towards character-driven story, rather than just get from point A to point B stories. So rather than just telling a parable, we're telling a connecting story of the person who's in the parable. And so for me, that's how I keep connected with my characters. That's how I move from a proof of concept short into a feature is it would be hard to develop a feature from a short if I didn't have that much connection with my characters. So when we're talking about someone asking me, hey, can you write a feature? 9 times out of 10, I can say yes, because I already have so much backstory and so much content to pull from that I know about this character to flesh out this feature from a 20-minute, 10 to 20 minute short. So for me, that's what gets me through it. Like that is my one thing, is character development, and my characters become my best friends. Even my bad guys, I love them. So
that's good. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's interesting what Daniel was saying about, he writes about himself and and just puts the stuff he's going through in a different place in time. That's, he's read my feature draft, which a lot of people have read and given me all kinds of different notes, and someday I'll rewrite it. It's interesting, the kind of feedback that I get, I take very personally, is about me. Why is your main character so unlikable? I'm like, what do you mean? That was me. Apparently I'm not as likable as I thought, or I didn't bring the right likable things to the surface in the beginning. Daniel didn't say that. That was somebody else.
You're very lovable, Betsy. Stop it.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, it's just interesting, the feedback you get, which is not really one of the questions, but it's just funny that once you start putting yourself in your script, which you can't avoid doing on some level, that's like the whole point, But on the other hand, then you start to realize that, you could have this giant backstory and this like sort of depth of your character in your head of who you are, but it's not what comes through necessarily on the page. So then you got to ask yourself, oh, well, is some of this going to come from the actor? That they'll just like, the way the character looks, which is definitely true. Some of it is just like the way that what they bring to it. And then some of it, but a lot of it, you've got to, oh, well, that's not obvious that she's a likable person. There's got to be some more likable scenes towards the beginning before you see the other side.
The reader can project themselves on the script too, just as the actors are going to be doing. So that reader brings something to it, and the actor brings something to it too. It's all interpretation. That's why opinions are so like, oh my gosh, opinions are crazy all over the place. You never know when an opinion's going to be a yes or a no, or it's usually heavily negative until you finally get that yes. That's what everybody says, and it's true.
That's true. Loki is supposed to be a bad guy, but he's so lovable, he got his own show. So I mean, like, classic example. People love him. He's gonna get his own show now. Like,
yeah, and that's it's gonna there's really good writing behind Loki and all that, but a lot of it's just Tom Hiddleston and how likable and charming he is. So the writers know what they're doing, and they knew, and then they cast him. They knew what he was going to bring to it. So plus they didn't have to go around asking their friends to read that script and get all kinds of notes. So that helped too, I guess.
That's true.
Well, that's true. Well, and I'm sure, as writers too, once you let a script out of your hands, you're always a little like concerned about, okay, I'm not going to control who acts this. It's going to be a big difference depending on who takes it on. Okay, so let's talk about process, which is really the nuts and bolts of what we do. And well, we'll go to Matt first. Let's talk about outlining and how much you do, and what is your process going through the agony.
Yeah, and again, I'll have to do the two different ones. Okay, so for my own projects, for the independent films, I will say I kind of make a mess. Like I start out, I get an idea and I start to just flesh out. I usually just start out just like writing it down like old school, like in a notebook. I'll go sit in a park somewhere and just write ideas for the movie, and then, okay, now I got to take it and sort of form it into an outline, and that could take anywhere from like, I don't know, a week to several weeks or so. And usually I'll feel very confident through the first half of the outline, and then through the second half, it's like, oh, but I think this is where it's gonna go, but it's like, but I'm not like 100% sure, but I know where I want to land, like on, the ending, eventually I know where I want it to finally go. Okay, so now I have that. Now I have, my kind of haphazard outline there. Then I start writing the draft. Usually by the time I get maybe, I don't know, 20 or 25 pages in, I've now gotten so many different ideas for the story that now I set the draft aside and I go back to the outline. And then I retool the outline to match what I've already written. And then I change it again to now reflect where I want it to further go. So then once I have that, then I'll go back to the draft. And then I usually make it up through maybe a little further, maybe this time, maybe like page 50 or so. And then like same thing. I've now had so many different ideas now, got to go back to the outline. So I'll go back, I'll rewrite all the outline again, and then I'll go back and start over again on the draft. And I basically continue to do that, like start, stop, draft, outline, go back and forth like that, until I get to like the final, until the end there. But then even then, it's like I'm still not done. Now, once I have that, the draft, now the thing that I like to do is to do like a read through and like hear it read out loud by people and interpret it, just like hear it, in other voices, and even just and I'll read a lot of the parts as well, but just to hear like reactions, and it's so interesting. Like a lot of the time, I get ideas for things I want to change even before anyone has said anything. Like just the act of being in a room with people and like come to essentially, sharing this whole story with them. It's like I can all of a sudden feel things that are things that are not working, and things that are, some that's like, okay, that felt right, and others it's like, oh, all that's going to change. So then I go back, and rewrite again. And I know that all of that is like opposite of, I think, what usual screenwriting advice is, like, like write, the outline and then write the draft, and always finish the draft and then show it to people and then go rewrite accordingly. But I kind of just, continuously go back and forth between draft and outline. For the cartoons, totally different. For cartoons, it's like, all right, I'm on assignment, so it's like it's not just like what I think is good. I have my audience is them, the story editor or the producer of the show. Like they are the ones who I have to entertain with this story. So it's all about just figuring out what I think they like, what do I feel like they think is working, and then presenting them something that fits with that. And so and then for that, like I actually do the much more structured thing. Well, I'll do the I write first like the synopsis, and then I'll write a full outline, and then rewrite according to their notes. I'm doing this back and forth stuff because it's like, all right, I have to show them the steps along the way, so I want to make sure I'm doing this exactly the way they're asking me to do. So that's it.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. But
there's a big difference in writing for assignment and then just writing what you want. Yeah.
All right, Daniel, go for it. What's your outline process and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot like what Matt was saying. I tend to, most of the time I'm writing something I want to write. Nobody asks me to write anything, which I wish they would more often. But but like when I published the Moriarty with Image Comics, so I spent 2 years writing that script for the first volume, which was 4 issues of Moriarty, because it was just a self-starting project. Nobody asked me to do it. And it took forever to figure it out. But yeah, so I spent a long time. I don't remember how long the outline was. It wasn't exceptionally long for having taken 2 years. It was probably 30 or 35 pages, which is kind of long outline, I guess. But it just took forever. I threw away my first 6 months of work. I tossed out and started over again. So stuff like that happened. But yeah, I try to outline it very thoroughly, and even figure out sometimes I'll write dialogue into the outline, so the outline grows and almost becomes partially a first draft at some point. I know people say expand your outline until it becomes the first draft. Well, I kind of do that. Yeah, that's good advice. I kind of do that. I get about 30% of the script done in the first draft done in the outline, maybe. And then I'll go write it. And it's like what Matt was saying, like you kind of go back and forth in a way. So yeah, definitely that is true. I'll just in moments be reflecting on the story, thinking about it, and I'll come up with ideas of, oh, this is why A equals B here. This is why they go from this point to this point. It's because this specifically thing kind of happens. You write that out into the outline, and then when you get to that part of the outline in the script, then it's there. But then you'll also kind of deviate it off the path from the outline too, because you'll put a lot of stuff in the outline that you don't end up needing, which is another thing that's been come up from Candace and Matt. Like, the stuff you thought was important that ends up not being in the script, but it still was important because it was architecture, so that kind of thing happens. You end up not writing scenes that you thought were going to be important because you ended up not needing it. It ended up being repetitive from another scene you had already, so you can kind of veer off and sometimes when you rewrite, you cut pages. In the rewrites, you end up picking up pages, because it's just like it's a living organism story, you know. So when you're really jazzing on it, it's really becoming a working thing. You end up bouncing back and forth. You end up cutting and expanding, and when you're doing that, that's how you know it's working. If you're just kind of on one solitary path and it's really not exciting, it's not going anywhere, it's not expanding, it's not jumping around on you, then it's, you know, I've never followed through very far on a project that I found doing that. You know, it has to jump all over the place and be this exciting, crazy organism of life in order for me to know that it's working. So, but I can spend a very long time in the outline. When I spend a very, very long time in the outline, the actual draft is done like in a week and a half, 2 weeks or something. You know, the writing, the script is actually like a party. I recently wrote a script. I had an idea in my head to write this small story, a thriller. And I was like, what am I going to do? Oh, Austin Film Festival's final deadline is in 10 days. I'm going to write this thing and get it done in 10 days. And I wrote an 8-page outline. I kept it, you know, really spare. And I'm like, I know the other stuff in the air that is going to happen in these scenes. And I'm just going to go ahead and write the draft and get it done. And I went ahead and wrote the draft and got it done and got it out. And I was pretty happy with it. So, you know, we'll see. So I can kind of cheat on it sometimes too, I suppose, but only because I've done the other work, the longer work. So, yeah.
Yeah, something nice about having a deadline like that. Sometimes it really helps you to get focused, and then you don't you know, spend so much time second guessing every decision. You just write it because it has to get done, and then you know, you can always change it up later. So I should set, you know, I've never done like NaNoWriMo or anything like that, but one of these days I will. Actually, I've been working on, well, I won't get into that. It's not really that related to screenwriting, but Candace, outline, process, etc.
So I fortunately had a unique, I guess, background in how I was taught writing. So I had a couple of different instructors I learned from, and both of them were pretty consistent on the fact that there's no right way to do it. So it was kind of like what works for the way your brain architecture is. And so I'm very visual. So when it comes to like, it's odd because most writers, like, they need the words on the paper. I'm like way more, I want to see what it's going to look like and hear what it's going to look like. And I have visual, like, you know, it's almost like a director making a lookbook when I write sometimes. So like, for example, the translating the short into a feature, like I'm a little bit more like structured because I'd already had all that. So for that process, like I'm adapting, I guess is sort of the style for adapting. I'm using note cards. I'm kind of, rather than a paper outline, like I put it all on a wall, and that way I can move the scenes around until I figure out what works, you know, structurally for it before I put it on paper. So it's more kind of influenced by my background in TV. So like when I was learning how to put stories together professionally outside of school, like once I graduated, was more of that writer's room style where there's multiple people and you use the index cards and you put it on a wall and you start sticking it all around until you figure out what's going in act 1, what's going in act 2, what's going in act 3, and how those things are going to tie you into the overarching story. And you have different color cards in this whole process, right? So that just clicked for my brain. Like it just worked for me because it was a visual way of doing words, I guess. And so that's more my process of an outline than it is like writing it down, like just with a notepad or on a piece of paper. I've tried that and I often just get lost in it. So what I'll do is I'll use note cards, and I have certain note cards that are like key story points, and you know, they have to be hit, and certain note cards are like, hey, this is a cool, like, you know, C line of the film itself, or the story for the short, or the series, whatever itself. And then I just literally stick them on a wall and start moving them around until I find the order that my brain is like, this works, like this story arches and it flows and it ebbs and it goes where it needs to go, kind of, you know, just naturally. And then I put it on paper as like a script, and then share that, and then get feedback, and then do it again, and then do a table read with, even if it's not the actors I necessarily am going to work with, a table read, and I do it again. So like that's kind of my general process. But a lot of times I'll, like, you know, if I were casting it, who would I put in the roles? And I'll print out pictures and put them up and look at them in front of me while I'm writing their characters. And I write character concepts before I write like the film itself or the story itself or the story outline itself. I actually start with, you know, what motivates this character if they're mad, what motivates them if they're sad, what motivates them if they're happy, etc. So that I know like how to make decisions for those characters, because I'm one person writing for like 21 different people and making decisions for maybe 21 different people in a film. So being able to know like what their brain space is for each one. So a lot of times I'll write a character card up and put that with the picture, and then I write, you know, kind of this story draft or this outline, you know, and moving around. And I'm like, oh, well, if Joe did that, then Jane's going to do this. That's how she's going to respond to that. Cause I do a lot of drama, rom-com writing, musical drama, that kind of stuff. So for me, that's kind of how they interact with each other is more important to me than writing a direct outline, because I get stuck if I do that. So for me, if I know what my character's choices are going to do and how those choices are going to affect the other character's choice making and that kind of stuff, it allows me to hit less walls when I'm writing. So kind of how Daniel was saying, like if I put more effort into the planning stages of writing, then I find that my scripts just come out, pretty quickly. I can say, oh, I'm going to write this in 10 days and actually write it because I have a concept of their world, their choice, structures, how their mind functions, where they're coming from, their backstory, and how their, choices are going to affect other people's decision-making process. When I say people, characters, decision-making process in the story, so that it really does just stick them in a place and stick them at a time and have them do a thing, unless, having to figure out, well, if he says this and she says this, then what is that going to do about that? Like I've already got that all figured out before I get in. It's kind of my process. It's weird, but works.
Makes sense to me. Can I say something else like that Candace brought up that I really like? When I studied with my mentor, his name was Ken Yulo, and part of the process that he taught me was called a period of meditation, which is where you just have the story in your mind and you just kind of walk around the world and you live with it for some period of weeks. Sometimes it's years, and so problems get worked out because you take this time, and it just ideas come to you, solutions. I've even on occasion, and this is going to sound a little flaky, but this is real. And it happened to me on this new story that I just wrote. I've had solutions to stories come to me in dreams because I'm thinking about it so much. My dream will work out, and a scene will play out for me in a dream, and I'll wake up, Eureka!
Write it down.
That has actually happened. Yeah. But because so a lot of what Candace, what you're talking about too, it's roundabout what I think Matt and I do. You're going about it a little differently, but it's a lot of the same sort of thing, just with a different approach. Yeah.
Well, and I can totally relate to the thing you're saying too about, okay, an idea coming to you, whether it's in, a dream or something like that, but like just when you're not trying to think of ideas, just when you're working on a thing. So it's just, it's in the back of your mind. And like, I often will get good ideas just when I'm like driving, just something about like driving and the mind is relaxed and just, just think right now, and just the wheels start turning, and all of a sudden like this idea is going like, oh, this problem I've been, trying to sort out here for weeks, all of a sudden, I know what to do. It's like you wish you could do that all the time.
Carrie's my new best friend in the car. I talk to her about my projects. I'm like, make a note, and I start telling her the things that I solve while I'm driving.
Oh, nice.
So I don't forget. The amount of gibberish notes on my phone that sometimes translate when I get home are great.
Yeah, it's like something I learned about acting is like actors want to at some point step into, they want to be in the unconscious part of their mind as they're performing, at least to a certain percentage, and there's something about that that works as being a writer too. Like you say, if you're driving, because you're in the process of doing, like an actor doing, that means your brain is going to places that you're not actively trying to control the process. You're not actively trying to. So therefore, all these ideas that are floating around have a chance to kind of come to you in different ways. Just like standing in the shower, quiet, like in this cocoon. Sometimes that's where I get all the best ideas, because it's this quietness away from everything, and my mind actually is still for a change. So, and sleep.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of Thomas Edison used to like try to fall asleep with something like heavy in his hand, so that when it fell down, he would wake up. And sometimes that would be how he got his ideas for inspiration. I always think that's interesting, because you're connecting to something. Yeah, there's always something lurking back there, like that but you don't know consciously, that you can access different ways. So that's really fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, writing is like solving a mystery. It takes time.
It is, because you're talking about human nature, and we are mysterious creatures. You don't always act in predictable ways, and every person would act differently in a given scenario. So that's not a small or simple thing that you're doing. We've got about 5 minutes left, and we had like 3 questions left, and this hour always goes like so fast. We get kind of lost in the middle of it, and it's always fun. Let's see. All right, well, we're going to talk about collaboration next, which I actually think is really important for any aspiring screenwriter, because it is collaborating from, you know, you got some time alone to shape the story, but eventually you're going to be collaborating. But if you want to write for TV or write with a partner, how is that different? Let's go to Matt first.
Okay, well, my experience with collaborating, it's again been on the cartoon shows, and I feel like for there it's different. It's not like I'm working with just like say a straight up writing partner. It's like, all right, I'm working for them. You know, I'm working on their show, so I am, you know, in a sense collaborating with them. But I know that you know, whatever they say I should do, I'm going to do, which is far different than if like, say if you have a writing partner and like, all right, the two of you have to agree on everything. I'm actually amazed at people who can do that, because I feel like I would not be able to do that if there's no like, you know, like authority figure saying, yes, this goes in and that doesn't. It's just the two of you that have to decide and all of that together. That to me seems like very difficult. I feel like we would just, if I tried to do that, we'd just argue all the time and never finish. So, you know, but everyone's different. Some people I know really love that process. Some people feel that I've talked to really successful writers who feel that they could not write something on their own. They said that they feel that they only are able to do this because they have this collaboration with a partner, and that's how they really get their creative juices flowing and really come up with good stuff. So I think, you know, everyone has different styles, and again, you have to adjust depending on what the situation is. If it's a show where they're in charge, it's like, all right, do what they say.
That's right. All right. Candace, you talked a little bit about that. Is there anything else you want to add about your process? I'm gonna let Daniel close this out.
Yeah, with collaborating, I think it's cool because so I'm working on a series, a sci-fi fantasy series, with more a writing partner, I guess is the way to word that, kind of what Matt was saying. And the cool thing is her and I have worked together before, so I actually chose her to work with me on the project out of a couple of writers I was considering, because I'm really good with, you know, the character building aspect, but she's phenomenal with the world building. And when you're talking sci-fi fantasy, you're making it up as you go. I mean, you're basing it on something people already know, but ultimately you're making the rules, right? So there are some constraints of rules that people accept already. So for example, in our world, we're dealing with Cupid, Eros. Well, those are the same thing, but in our world, they're not. They're brothers, right? So we get to make up some of the rules, but we have to follow other rules, like how they interact with the world can only be a certain way, because that's how everyone has for years thought of it, right? With these, the Greek mythology and lore and gods. And so working with her, it's cool because we do more on a collaboration process. I kind of throw the spaghetti on the wall and it sticks in a certain order. And I say, okay, this is kind of what we're going for. And then she takes that and she actually writes their character world. Like she writes the whole world for that, you know, that whole episode. You know, she puts in dialogue and then we meet again. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's change this to that and that to that a little for the dialogue stuff. Because again, she's great at their, like, you know, otherworldly interaction. But then sometimes when it comes to like, you know, two characters going out on a date, the dialogue they have together is very, you know, world, like natural world grounded. And so it's a little more tricky for her. So we basically just go back and forth like that. So the process for that is different in that, you know, I'm not putting cards on a wall or making an outline per se, even. We're literally just having a meeting and saying, what if our characters did this? What if they did that? Well, what if they did that? And then she takes it and makes a world, brings it back, a whole script, and I read it. And then I go, that's really cool. I like what they're doing here. I like what they're doing there. Can we take them and put them in this scenario now and write a scene for that? And so she kind of builds the world and I take the characters and give them the character interactions they have, right? And then we have a third person who's involved with us on that process, and they're just the ideas guy. Like they're just like, wouldn't it be cool if, well, what if like this? Like they have no limits on themselves, you know, neither world nor otherworldly limit on themselves. So they're the one breaking the rules, right? So she's got the world rules and I've got the character and action rules, and then he's just, there are no rules. They can do whatever in my side of the world. And so the cool thing is the three of us have worked together enough on other stuff where there were certain constraints, or she's written stuff and I was, you know, maybe directed it, or, you know, he's written stuff and I directed it, or vice versa, you know, around the table. Then when we come together to work on the project, we already kind of have a shorthand in a language where we're like, oh yeah, that, but that, like also that too. And we're not even actually saying words. We're just like coming up with ideas and saying like an idea. And then it's, oh, everyone knows what it is. Yeah, let's go with that. So it's different when you're working with someone that you've worked with before. I have another project where I'm working with someone who I haven't worked with before, and he's totally different type of writer than me. He's very by the book. You write an outline, point A, you know, beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. And I'm like, that's stressing me out. Like, that's really hard. So for that, you know, I just basically wrote the character cards. Like I was talking about, my style is wrote these character cards and gave them to him and said, here's the characters. And he said, I can work with that. And then he makes the beat outline. And I'm like, okay. And then, writing the scenes, who's going to write what types of scenes and breaking it up that way. So like maybe obviously my predominant strength in writing is writing dialogue that's, very dramatic, rom-com-y type stuff. His is more, really grounded, straightforward, or action or things like that. So we break the scenes up that way. Right. So it's just like playing to strengths is kind of how, when I'm collaborating or when I'm partnering with someone to write, like we really sit down for like 2 or 3 times at least and say, what's your strengths? Like genuinely, don't try and show off, like what can you really genuinely do, not like what do you want to do or wish you could do. And then we're honest about that with each other. And I'll honestly be like, dude, I suck at building worlds sometimes. Like I'm very natural world grounded. What I see trees outside, so I can write about trees. Like I can't write about Saturn because I've never been there or whatever. So then getting with a writer who their strength is, well, they can write about Saturn from a picture they saw from NASA, and they've built this whole world on Saturn. That for me, that's the process of collaborating. So rather than, if I'm given the option, choosing who I collaborate with, that's the process. If I'm not given the option, sitting down for however long it takes with this person to figure out what's your strength, what's mine, and how can we play into those for the writing process to develop something people actually enjoy.
Good. Thank you. Daniel, so we're at 4:00, but take us away for 4 or 5 minutes, however long you want, and then we'll say goodbye for today. And I do want to have you all back to talk about your projects again. So please post your links and everything to your projects, to your website, and to anything that anyone would want to see, if you'd like to, right here on the Facebook video after we close out. And we'll come back and talk about writing for theater and writing for comics and some of the other stuff that you guys do in the future. All right, take it away, Dan.
Okay, just real quick. My most experience of collaboration has been in creating comic books, and collaborating with an artist. Because an artist, sequential storytelling is a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So you're an artist that have to understand storytelling. So if you want to get into comics, you need to get an artist that understands sequential storytelling. Somebody that can just draw nice posters. You need to go to somebody that does sequential. And doing that, it's really nice because like I'll write my scripts. I'll be very specific about camera angles and actions and things that are happening to make it as easy on the artist as possible. But there comes points where things that I'm doing don't really work the way I think they will. And so the artist needs to correct it, and they'll like write me like, hey, I need to combine these 2 panels. I had to change this angle to make this work. And it's always better that way, especially with the artists that I work with. The story always ends up being the moment ends up being communicated much better by the way they express it. Also, there's this aspect of acting where Anthony and Chris, these 2 guys that I've worked with a lot, they'll make these expressions for these characters that are complicated and like expressing duality the way an actor would, so that there's a depth to the script that's not just in the words that the artist is mining. Like an actor would do. So, that's always wonderful. And then working with the publisher is always interesting too, because then they'll say things like your books are becoming too expensive to print. You need to cut your page count down. You need to keep them under 28 pages, cut it out. So they're like, okay, I'm gonna write 20-page comics now. That's it. And so then that becomes a whole thing of, brevity and storytelling and being more succinct and all that sort of thing. And so that dictates how you tell the story too. So there's a collaboration between the artist and the publisher. So that's kind of that's a lot of the collaboration that I've experienced in creating comics. So there you go.
That's a lot of constraints there.
Yeah, but parameters are good. They can be. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you all. Thank you to Sue and Tessa and or Justin and anyone else that was watching during this hour. I know there'll be probably a fair number that come back and watch this in replay. So thank you for everything that you taught us and for continuing to create in a tough field.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It was fun. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.